Good morning, my friends. This is Tyra Jarvis with Kefi Coaching, and this is Transformation Tuesday. I come to you live every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific time, and we've been talking about mindset, motivation, and transformation, and all the elements of the transformation cycle, if you will, that can lead to you creating a change in your life, in any area of life that you're interested in creating a change in. And today I want to talk about, I think I've made it pretty clear that I like control over my circumstances. And when I look at my own transformation and I look at where I caused the biggest changes in my life, it had to do with a really clear focus and alignment and strategy around changing my circumstances. And what happens when you don't have power and control over your circumstances is you can't really get unstuck, and you can't get in action and take the actions that you need to take. So today I want to talk about power and control and what happens in the worst of circumstances. There's no question I work with, successful professionals that are dealing with controlling their circumstances. At the same time, I also work with survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking, which would also have concerns and issues around controlling their circumstances. And October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so I wanted to take this morning's Transformation Tuesday to talk a little bit more about what that is and why you should care and why I care. So domestic violence is a major critical source of breakdown in many families and relationships, and it's the root cause of many of the challenges facing our economy and society today. And it's about power and control, and it's about fear of loss of power and control in the abuser, and that extends over to crossing boundaries with another person and using power and control to control the other person. So October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and that's why I've chosen to talk about this today. So when we talk about how that could possibly happen, a lot of times I think it's a breakdown not only with fear, but it's also possible breakdowns in managing well-being and being able to manage frustration and patience and those kinds of things, and maybe having some skill gaps in the areas of problem solving and communication. But it happens everywhere. It affects millions of both women and men, every race, every religion, every culture, every status, every economic position. No one is immune from it. And nearly 3 out of 4 Americans personally know someone who has or is a victim of domestic violence. And so the question would be, if you look around any room, any neighborhood, any gathering of friends, just know that there's survivors and possible victims in that very surroundings that you're in, and they're currently experiencing very terrifying, intimate assault in their relationships. So 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men are victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner. And 24 people per minute are victims of rape, physical violence, and stalking by domestic partners in the U.S. alone. So, my story is I've always been about empowering myself and empowering other women and girls, and I've had an affinity for knowing more about why that needs to have some focus. And I've also always been a volunteer, and I've had opportunities to volunteer for some amazing organizations. And I currently volunteer for Stand Up Placer, and it is the Domestic Violence, Sexual Assault, and Human Trafficking Services Agency in Placer County. And I initially became crisis trained back in 2010, and then I was a volunteer for a while, and then I left the area for a job, and when I came back, I was invited to join their board of directors. And I've been serving on their board since 2017, and I currently have the pleasure of being board president. And this is important because it allows me to, at least indirectly, support the mission of Stand Up Placer and support the services that we provide. And one of the things I love about this field is that it is a partnership between government agencies who provide funding and also with law enforcement and all the services agencies that help cross-refer people to our local agency. So we want to look at, what it is, and again, why is it that I'm so involved? And, and some people think that domestic violence, first of all, it's between intimate domestic partners. There's other forms of violence for sure. And it isn't just physical abuse. It isn't just seeing, black eyes and bruises and cuts and strangulation marks or whatever from an escalation. But it's intimidation, it's emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, spiritual abuse. The lack of respect for another person's boundaries causes behaviors that break the person's spirit down to the point that they're not able to move. They're not able to move. And even if they are able to move, the fear, and those of us that experience change, the fear of the unknown is often worse than the known of the abuser. And that's why many victims stay. But my personal nightmare started back in 2016, and it involved my youngest niece, and it was the father of my great nephew, and he was ultimately convicted of felony domestic violence. The charges against him were so severe that he was charged in criminal court, and he served, and he is still serving some of his sentencing. But you ask yourself, how could this happen to us? And I'm sure my niece numerous times asked, how can this really be happening to me, right? Because in the beginning, she was so excited by this relationship and the possibility of being a family, and especially when they were expecting a child. And we were all excited for them because we wanted them to have this bright future that they wanted to create together. But unbeknownst to us, she was hiding the fact that the abuse had started pretty early in their relationship, and she was ashamed to let any of us know. And so by the time we actually looked for the signs or looked for the signals or figured out, what was happening, she was already being physically abused, sexually abused, and a variety of other, financial abuse. Phones were being stolen, bank accounts, passwords, log, identity threat. It was everything to just break down a human person for sure. So she suffered extreme abuse throughout this relation, and much in the presence of my great nephew, which is one of the biggest concerns about families that are coping. And you can add COVID and the stresses of COVID on top of that, but they're stressed and they're trying to deal with the skills that they have, which aren't adequate to deal with the stressors, and they're doing it in front of children. And there's a statistic that I have here about children because I think this is the most important. Children in homes where domestic violence occurs are 15 times more likely to be physically abused or seriously neglected. And a child exposed to DV are 5 to 7 times more likely to experience significant psychological problems. So it's not contained just to the adults. So in the case of my niece, he was very controlling, manipulative, vindictive. He was a bully. His anger would escalate to rage and violence. She was attempting to fend for herself while hiding it and not reaching out for help. And she lived in fear for several years and still does today, despite the conviction, sentencing, and probation. And, the result to our family is that we had a family member who was vibrant, talented, fearless, and a happy young woman who was transformed into fearful, paranoid shell of her former self. And our entire family was crushed watching this train wreck and then working as best as we could to help her with her recovery. She did seek services, but it's going to be a lifelong process to try to undo some of the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses that experience in one relationship, caused her. So, some of the signs to look for, because if you're asking, what can I do? You need to get involved, and you need to get involved with the communities that you're in, and know that it's very likely going on right beneath your nose. But it is psychological, physical, spiritual, and financial. So look for control of time and control of money, kinds of conversations that we could be going on. It's impacted health and emotional well-being. So look to see for some changes. Look for isolation. Are they not connecting with family and friends anymore? Did they change their behavior? Did they change their physical appearance? Oftentimes, they're not allowed to use makeup, or they're not allowed to go and do things that they want to do. And in extreme cases, they might even not go to the doctor for fear of being outed or whatever. They're going to lose their job. There's going to be some economic impact because their behavior is so irrational because of this. Physical property, all of the things that might happen around, financial needs and things like that. But that's all classic behavior: the isolation, the controlling time and money, the controlling behavior, sectioning them off. Although the system of care was there to help my niece, again, she's still recovering, and most survivors still are. So just be aware of those kinds of things that could possibly be happening. And, stand up to it, and don't be afraid to ask, can I help you? Be aware of your local resources so that you can share those resources with the people that you care about. Donate, help financially where you can, and support federal regulation and laws that help to provide funding to victims and survivors of domestic violence. This is a systemic problem that it's all about how we have gender roles and sex roles and stereotypes and certain behavior, and we tolerate certain things that have allowed it to perpetuate. And we all have to stand up now to make sure that we don't do that any longer. Another thing, if you're an employer, you might consider hiring survivors. Give them an opportunity to help move their life forward. And nationally, we have Wear Purple Day. That's on October 21st. That will be the day that we honor Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So if you or someone that you know are experiencing a domestic violence situation with an intimate partner, please reach out for help. Here in Placer County, our Stand Up Placer hotline is 800-575-5352. There's people there 24/7 waiting to help understand and direct you and provide you some support wherever possible. And then nationally, if you're not in our local area, there's a National Domestic Violence Hotline, and that number's 800-799-SAFE, which is 7233. So 800-799-7233. So with that, please honor Domestic Violence Awareness Month. There's a lot of free resources out there where you can learn a little bit more. Pay attention to the people that you care about in your life. Make sure that you know that if they are experiencing challenges, that they know that there's people that care and resources that are out there that are designed and intended to help them rebuild and regain the power and control over their circumstances and over their life. So with that, this is Tyra Jarvis with Kefi Coaching. Thanks for listening. Together we can raise awareness, support survivors, and advocate for a world free of violence, where everyone can have peace and freedom in their own home and in their own life. And it starts with each of us. So take care, and I'll turn into you next week. Bye-bye.